In the tranquil outskirts of Tallahassee, Florida, a typically serene suburban neighborhood is abruptly thrust into turmoil when a university professor is discovered on his driveway, grievously injured and bleeding profusely. At the center of this disturbing incident is Dan Markel, a well-liked individual with a promising future and a loving family, including 2 young sons. However, in the aftermath of this shocking event, law enforcement finds themselves confronted with a perplexing puzzle. No leads, no suspects, no DNA evidence, and only a single ambiguous witness. The investigation into Markel's tragic fate proves to be a daunting challenge, demanding the full extent of the police's expertise and unwavering patience. It becomes evident that uncovering the truth behind this enigmatic case will require considerable time and effort. Before delving further into this perplexing tale, it's important to extend heartfelt condolences to the grieving family and friends of Dan Markel, who was unjustly taken from them far too soon, leaving an irreplaceable void in their lives. Born in 1972 in Toronto, Canada, Dan Markel emerged as a remarkably accomplished and intellectually gifted individual. Throughout his academic journey, Dan traversed various prestigious institutions, including the University of Jerusalem, Cambridge, and ultimately Harvard, where he obtained his law degree in 2001. Following his graduation, Dan initially served as a clerk at a law firm for several years. However, in 2005, an irresistible opportunity presented itself when Florida State University sought someone with Dan's precise expertise to join their College of Law. Seizing this chance, Dan eagerly embraced the prospect of a new chapter in his career. Dan's transition to academia proved seamless, aligning perfectly with his passion for teaching and his profound interest in criminal law. Amidst instructing a range of law courses at the university, Dan also dedicated himself to prolific scholarly pursuits, penning numerous papers on various aspects of criminal law. Adding to the enriching tapestry of Dan's life was the introduction of his new partner, Wendy Adelson, whom he encountered on a Jewish singles dating website. At the time of their meeting, Dan was 33 years old, while Wendy was 26, and their connection was instant. Their shared passion for law further cemented their compatibility, with Wendy pursuing her legal studies when they first crossed paths. Following in Dan's footsteps, Wendy would eventually embark on a career in academia, teaching law at Florida State University. Their relationship blossomed rapidly, marked by mutual understanding and affection. So much so that the couple swiftly progressed from acquaintances to engaged partners, culminating in their marriage on February 26, 2006. In the ensuing years, Dan and Wendy appeared to be living out their idyllic vision of life, enjoying fulfilling careers, financial stability, and the joys of parenthood, with the arrival of their first son in 2009, followed closely by a second in 2010. However, the seemingly picture-perfect narrative took a stark turn in 2012 when cracks began to surface in their relationship, ultimately leading to their separation. Before their divorce, Dan and Wendy maintained a veil of privacy around the intricacies of their relationship, keeping the details largely confined to themselves. The sudden and drastic deterioration of their marriage remains shrouded in uncertainty, leaving observers without definitive answers. It becomes evident that both Dan and Wendy were not inclined to broadcast their personal struggles, adhering to a pattern of swift decision-making. By 2013, the couple's divorce was finalized, marking the conclusion of their union. Despite any outward appearances, the reality of their domestic life was far from the facade they presented to the world. This incongruity became glaringly apparent to Dan when he returned home from a work trip, only to be confronted with a scene of utter desolation. His wife and children were nowhere to be found, and the once familiar surroundings of his home had been stripped bare, leaving him stunned and bewildered. Among the scant remnants Wendy left behind for Dan was a solitary mattress, a token of her departure that underscored the meticulous planning behind her exit. It was evident that Wendy's decision to leave Dan wasn't impulsive. Rather, it had been meticulously orchestrated over an extended period. The thoroughness with which she had stripped their home bare served as a poignant testament to the irreparable breakdown of their marriage. Amidst the sparse remnants, one item stood out conspicuously atop the mattress: a stack of divorce papers. Far from a straightforward dissolution of their union, Wendy had approached the divorce proceedings with a calculated and vindictive fervor. Her actions spoke volumes, portraying a deliberate attempt to inflict maximum emotional harm upon Dan. Described by Dan himself as a Pearl Harbor-style separation, Wendy's conduct during the divorce process was marked by an unrelenting determination to erase any trace of Dan Markel from her and their children's lives. Wendy's vindictiveness extended even to the realm of their children, as she unilaterally changed their surnames and even altered one of their middle names, erasing a tribute to one of Dan's deceased relatives. Such actions demonstrated a callous disregard for the emotional well-being of the children, as she sought to sever their ties with their father in a manner that could only be described as vindictive and cruel. Fast forward to 2014, Dan and Wendy had begun to navigate their separate lives, albeit with shared custody of their sons. While Wendy pursued a career in writing, focusing on a law book addressing human trafficking, her literary efforts fell far short of Dan's eloquence. Described as criminally lousy, Wendy's book failed to resonate with readers, leaving it languishing on bookstore shelves, devoid of interest or acclaim. On July 18th, following his usual routine, Dan embarked on the familiar task of picking up his children from Wendy's house to take them to preschool. The morning unfolded with routine activities, including a stop at the gym and a few errands, seemingly unremarkable in nature. However, the tranquility of the day was soon shattered. By 11 a.m., Dan had completed his errands and returned home. As he pulled into his driveway, a chilling realization dawned upon him. There was an unexpected presence awaiting his arrival. Though the identity of the individual Dan was conversing with on the phone remains undisclosed, this person would later provide crucial information to the authorities. It became apparent that whoever lay in wait for Dan was not there with benign intentions. Without warning or preamble, the ominous silence was ruptured by a deafening bang. Before Dan could even react, a bullet tore through the driver's side window, striking him directly in the face with devastating force. The impact was so severe that Dan's head recoiled, colliding forcefully with the headrest. A nearby neighbor, startled by the gunshot, witnessed the horrific aftermath firsthand. As Dan remained slumped in the driver's seat, shards of shattered glass littered the interior, and blood stained the windshield and upholstery. Horrified by the scene unfolding before them, the neighbor wasted no time in summoning emergency assistance, promptly dialing 911 to report the harrowing incident. The neighbors said, "I saw a car pull into the driveway. Then there was a gunshot. My neighbor is sat in the front of the car. In a bad way. He's still alive but can't respond to me. You need to send an ambulance quickly. We don't know if he's tried to kill himself or if someone shot him, but he needs help." As the ambulance raced to the scene, law enforcement officers sought to gather any possible leads from the neighbor who had witnessed the disturbing events. Despite their efforts, the neighbor could only provide a fleeting glimpse of a silver Toyota Prius fleeing the area immediately following the gunshot. While this detail offered a slender thread of investigation for the police, its significance remained uncertain. It could have been merely coincidental, a passing vehicle unconnected to the incident on any other ordinary day. Upon the arrival of the ambulance 19 minutes later, Dan was swiftly transported to the nearest hospital. However, tragically, a critical error occurred in communication. The dispatcher who had communicated with Dan's neighbor failed to convey the severity of Dan's condition to the ambulance crew. Consequently, Precious moments elapsed as the ambulance made its way to the scene, each second crucial in determining Dan's chances of survival. Despite the efforts of medical personnel, Dan succumbed to his grievous injuries. He passed away in intensive care 14 hours later, his untimely demise casting a shadow of sorrow over all those touched by his life. The police faced a formidable challenge. A man who appeared to have no enemies, widely admired as a family-oriented individual, had been ruthlessly gunned down in his own driveway. With scant evidence beyond the sighting of a silver Toyota Prius, a detail that may or may not prove relevant, the investigation loomed as an intricate puzzle with no clear starting point. In the wake of Dan's tragic demise, a poignant memorial underscored the profound impact he had made on those around him. The service drew a sizable gathering of mourners, including friends, family, and students, all united in their desire to bid farewell to a beloved figure. In their quest for answers, the police turned their attention to Dan's ex-wife, Wendy Adelson. While Wendy was not immediately placed under arrest, she became the focal point of the investigation, chosen as the initial subject of scrutiny. As she entered the interview room, she listened to a voicemail left by a friend, an estate agent, a message that would likely prove significant in the unfolding inquiry. "Hi, Wendy. I feel a bit silly doing this. I'm not trying to be dramatic, but there was a shooting around where you used to live today. I hope you're okay." My friend Wendy, visibly shaken, played the voicemail for the police investigators. The investigators told her what was going on. "I'm sorry you had to hear it that way, but there was a shooting at your former home today. Your ex-husband has been very seriously injured and is likely not going to survive." Wendy's emotions overwhelmed her as she entered the interview room, her distress evident as she instantly broke down. Despite her grief, she attempted to provide the investigators with information, recounting that she had messaged Dan earlier that morning, asserting that everything had seemed normal. Anxiously, she implored the officers to divulge what had happened to her ex-husband, desperate for answers. In response, the officer gently informed Wendy that he couldn't disclose any details until her whereabouts at the time of the shooting were confirmed, a necessary step in ruling her out of suspicion. Despite her anguish, Wendy remained cooperative, though her grief was palpable, nearly consuming her. Through tear-filled eyes, Wendy recounted her activities that morning, affirming that she hadn't left her home until around noon to attend to various errands. Her distress heightened when she mentioned attempting to drive up her old street, only to find it blocked, a realization that compounded her shock and confusion. When asked if she knew anyone who might harbor ill will toward Dan, Wendy's tears only intensified, her response punctuated by sobs. She admitted that Dan could sometimes rub people the wrong way, but insisted she couldn't fathom anyone wanting to harm him. However, when questioned about any outstanding debts, Wendy's tearful admission that Dan owed her money momentarily raised suspicions. In the face of Wendy's genuine shock and distress, the interviewing officer approached the delicate situation with tact and compassion, recognizing the need for sensitivity in handling her fragile state. The challenge confronting the police mid dauntingly large. Despite their exhaustive efforts, they remained bereft of substantial leads. The absence of any apparent attempt at robbery further complicated matters, suggesting a motive rooted in revenge rather than financial gain. However, discerning the cause for such retribution proved elusive. Had Dan unwittingly provoked someone to the point of murderous intent? The notion of irritation paled in comparison to the severity of the crime. To escalate from annoyance to lethal violence in broad daylight was unfathomable. In a bid to galvanize public assistance, the police appealed for information, emphasizing the premeditated nature of the attack and offering a substantial reward for any leads leading to an arrest and conviction. Initially set at a modest sum, the reward swelled to a staggering $25,000, buoyed by the additional pledge of a $100,000 reward from an anonymous donor. Expanding their scope, the police cast their net wide, questioning Dan's students, acquaintances, and family members. Yet, despite their painstaking inquiries, The responses echoed a common refrain. Dan was universally regarded as a kind-hearted, dedicated individual, a sentiment that only deepened the perplexity surrounding his tragic demise. In any murder investigation, the crucial first 24 hours are paramount for gathering vital evidence. However, as time passed without a breakthrough, the window of opportunity gradually closed, leaving the police grappling with a dearth of substantive leads and mounting frustration. The bombshell revelation that Garcia and Rivera had been hired for their nefarious services did not end with their own confessions. As the gravity of their situation became apparent, they wasted no time in implicating their employers, none other than Charlie and Donna Edelson, relatives of Dan's ex-wife. Charlie, the brother of Dan's ex-wife, and Donna, her mother, appeared, on the surface, to be upstanding individuals running the Adelson Institute, a reputable dental practice where Charlie served as the dentist and Donna managed patient affairs. However, the mere association with these individuals was insufficient grounds for definitive culpability. The police remained cautious, recognizing the possibility that Garcia and Rivera might falsely implicate others in a bid to secure leniency for themselves. The perplexing question lingered. What motive could possibly link a respected dental family with two hired hitmen from Miami? Despite the seemingly disparate elements of this sinister tableau, investigators were determined to uncover the truth. And, as events would soon reveal, the answer lay closer to home than anyone could have anticipated. Just when it seemed the case was straightforward, a tale of a vengeful mother-in-law and her daughter's ex-husband, a bombshell was dropped by Luis Rivera, poised to shatter the narrative. While serving time without bail for unrelated charges, Rivera sought to strike a deal with investigators, offering crucial information in exchange for leniency. Rivera's account of events diverged dramatically from the assumed narrative. He claimed ignorance regarding the intended murder until he was already in the car with Garcia, believing they were embarking on a simple drug robbery. When informed of the plan to kill Dan Markel, Rivera expressed reluctance, suggesting they instead rob the woman who had hired them. Despite the promised payment of $35,000 each, Rivera adamantly asserted his reluctance to kill a man he had never met and harbored no ill will towards. Furthermore, Rivera professed ignorance of the Edelsons, but made reference to a woman named Katie, short for Catherine, who he claimed was the mastermind behind the scheme. According to Rivera, the motive behind the murder was a woman's desire to regain custody of her children, suggesting a far more complex and sinister motive than mere familial vendetta. Despite the mounting evidence implicating the Edelsons, they continued to deny any involvement in the murder. However, the FBI's intervention marked a pivotal turning point in the investigation. Through a sting operation, they attempted to incriminate the family, with Charlie Adelson receiving ominous phone calls from an individual named Sandy, purportedly concerned about Rivera's welfare in prison. Fortunately for Charlie, Sandy was an undercover cop, but the FBI's efforts to uncover incriminating evidence via Charlie's cell phone had thus far proven unsuccessful. With Rivera's shocking revelations and the FBI's involvement,